They threw her into a blizzard. 3 days after giving birth, her newborn daughter screaming in her arms. They called her garbage, worthless, nobody. What they did not know, in 4 hours, she would inherit $892 million, and she was about to destroy every single one of them. This is not fiction. This is the true story of the greatest satisfying revenge you will ever hear. Stay until the end. Because what happened in that courtroom, their faces when they realized who she really was, you do not want to miss that moment. If you love karma stories, hit subscribe now, drop a comment, tell me what you would do. Let us begin.
We are
February
truly sorry
11th,
for our
cold Tuesday
transgressions.
afternoon. I was
Please
8 months
spare our
pregnant,
family from this
driving my old
disgrace.
Honda Civic
We
through
will
the
do
winding roads of
anything.
Greenwich, Connecticut, toward the Whitmore estate. My hands gripped the steering wheel tighter than necessary. My heart was beating faster than it should have been. Today was supposed to be my surprise baby shower. My mother-in-law, Genevieve, had organized it herself, which should have been my first warning sign. In 3 years of marriage, Genevieve Whitmore had never organized anything for me. Not a birthday dinner, not an anniversary celebration, not even a welcome to the family lunch. But I wanted so badly to believe things were changing. I wanted so badly to believe I had finally been accepted. The Whitmore mansion appeared through the bare winter trees. Georgian columns, stone facade, windows that gleamed like cold eyes watching my approach. I had lived adjacent to this world for 3 years, attending dinners and galas and charity events, always standing slightly one apart, always feeling like an imposter in borrowed clothes. Today, I thought, maybe that would finally change. I parked my car at the end of a row of Mercedes and BMWs. A valet gave me a look that said I did not belong here. I was used to those looks by now. Inside, the grand foyer smelled of expensive flowers and old money. I could hear voices coming from the ballroom, the tinkling of glasses, the polite laughter of wealthy women pretending to care about each other. I smoothed my maternity dress, a simple blue thing I had bought on sale because I could not afford the designer labels everyone else wore. I took a deep breath. I walked toward the ballroom doors, and I stopped. Through the crack in the doors, I could see the room. 50 women in designer gowns seated at round tables with crystal centerpieces, a podium at the front with the Whitmore Foundation logo, waiters in black carrying silver trays, everything elegant, everything expensive, everything screaming old money and privilege, but no pink or blue balloons, no baby decorations, no gifts wrapped in pastel paper. This was not a baby shower. I pushed open the doors and stepped inside. 50 pairs of eyes turned toward me. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Someone actually gasped. My mother-in-law, Genevieve, stood near the podium, wearing a cream-colored Chanel suit that probably cost more than my car. She was 62 years old but looked 50, thanks to the best cosmetic procedures money could buy. Her smile was perfect. Her eyes were ice cold. "Oh, Claire," she said, her voice carrying across the suddenly silent room. "I thought you understood. This is the Whitmore Women's Foundation annual dinner." She paused, letting the words sink in. "But since you are here, would you mind helping Rosalita with the coats? We are terribly short-staffed." 50 women watched me. Some looked pitying. Most looked amused. A few actually smirked. The humiliation burned through me like acid. I wanted to scream. I wanted to cry. I wanted to tell them all that I was not trash, that I was a person, that I deserved better than this. But I had learned, over 3 years of marriage, that fighting Genevieve only made things worse. She always won. She always found a way to make me look crazy, irrational, ungrateful. So I nodded. I turned. I walked toward the coat room, my pregnant belly leading the way, my cheeks burning with shame. That is when I noticed the first thing that would change everything. My husband, Preston, was not at the party. He had claimed a work emergency that morning, kissing my forehead and promising he would try to make it in time for my shower. But through a window, I caught a glimpse of his sister Brooke's Instagram live stream. In the background, seated at Genevieve's right hand at the main table, was a woman I did not recognize. Young, beautiful, blonde hair cascading over bare shoulders, a dress that probably cost thousands, and she was laughing at something Genevieve said with the easy comfort of someone who belonged. I did not recognize her, but something about her made my stomach clench. The second thing I noticed was Preston's father, Richard. He was standing by the bar, nursing a whiskey, and when our eyes met, He looked away immediately. In 3 years, Richard had barely spoken 100 words to me. He was a quiet man, always in his wife's shadow, but he had never actively avoided looking at me before. Never acted like making eye contact would somehow hurt him. Something was wrong. I could feel it in my bones. I excused myself to the bathroom. In my purse, I found an envelope that had been forwarded from my old apartment. I had meant to open it days ago but kept forgetting. The return address read Bradford and Associates, Estate Law. I tore it open with shaking fingers. Dear Miss Bennett, the letter began, using my maiden name. Regarding the estate of Henry James Bennett, your maternal grandfather, we have been attempting to reach you for 18 months regarding a substantial inheritance. Please contact our offices immediately. Time-sensitive matters require your attention. I read it 3 times. Each time, the words meant the same impossible thing. My mother died when I was 12. Cancer took her slowly, painfully, while I watched helplessly from her hospital bedside. In her final days, she told me about our family. We have no one, baby, she had whispered. My parents died before you were born. It is just us, you and me against the world. She had lied to me. I had a grandfather. He had been looking for me, and now, apparently, he had left me something. I put the letter away. I would deal with it later. Right now. I just needed to survive this night. But as I walked back toward the main hall, passing Richard's private study, I heard voices. The door was slightly open, and I heard my name. I stopped, held my breath, listened. Genevieve's voice, low and urgent, the Bennett inheritance. If she finds out before we are ready, everything falls apart. Richard's voice, tired and resigned. She will find out eventually. Genevieve. The lawyers have been trying to reach her for over a year. We cannot keep intercepting her mail forever, which is exactly why I have been handling it carefully. Genevieve's voice turned cold. By the time that girl realizes anything, Preston and Natalie will be married. The inheritance will be contested as marital assets. We will get what we need to save the company, and she will get nothing. Natalie, the name hit me like a physical blow. Richard sighed heavily. This is wrong. What we are doing to her is wrong. Wrong, Genevieve laughed, and the sound made my blood freeze. What is wrong is that we are $47 million in debt while that nobody from nowhere sits on a fortune she does not even know exists. I am simply correcting an injustice. Her grandfather should have left that money to Catherine, who would have married into a proper family if she had not run off with that worthless groundskeeper. My hand went to my belly. My daughter kicked, hard, as if she could sense my fear. They knew about an inheritance I did not know existed. They had been intercepting my mail. They were planning to steal from me. My entire marriage was based on a lie. My phone buzzed in my purse. I pulled it out with numb fingers. Text from Preston. Hey, babe. Stuck at work. Don't wait up. Love you. With shaking hands, I opened an Instagram. Preston had just posted a story 30 seconds ago. A rooftop bar downtown, city lights twinkling behind him, and beside him, her arm linked through his, was the beautiful blonde woman from the party, Natalie. That night, I did not confront anyone. I did not cry. I did not scream or throw things or do any of the dramatic things you see in movies. Instead, I did what I had been trained to do. I investigated. 6 years ago, before I met Preston Whitmore, I was an investigative journalist. I worked for a newspaper in Hartford, covering corruption stories and white-collar crime. I spent my days digging through financial records, interviewing reluctant witnesses, piecing together puzzles that powerful people wanted to keep hidden. I was good at it, really good. I had instincts. I could smell a lie from a mile away. Then I met Preston at a charity gala. He was charming, handsome, attentive. He laughed at my jokes. He asked about my work with what seemed like genuine interest. He made me feel seen in a way I had never experienced before. Within a year, he convinced me to quit my job. A Whitmore wife does not work, Genevieve had said at our engagement dinner, her tone making clear this was not a suggestion. You will have plenty to do managing the household and supporting Preston's career. I was young, I was in love. I was stupid enough to believe that giving up everything meant I finally belonged somewhere. Now at 2 in the morning, while my husband stayed out with his mistress. The journalist inside me woke up screaming. I searched Preston's home office while the house was empty. My pregnant belly made it difficult to bend down, but I managed. In his desk drawer, I found credit card statements showing purchases I had never seen. A diamond bracelet for $8,000, a designer bag for $12,000, jewelry, lingerie, hotel suites. None of it for me. In his gym bag, tucked inside a rolled-up sock, I found a burner phone, the kind you buy with cash when you do not want anyone tracking your calls. I turned it on, scrolled through the messages, all from someone saved as N. One message read, quote, I cannot wait until we do not have to hide anymore. Soon, baby. Soon we will be together for real. End quote. Another said, quote, she is so clueless, it is almost sad. After the baby comes, we can finally be done with this charade. End quote. And the most recent one, sent just that evening. Quote, dinner was amazing. I love you so much. Thank you for choosing me. End quote. I photographed everything, every message, every receipt, every piece of evidence that my marriage was a carefully constructed lie. I sent copies to my best friend Megan, saved backups to a cloud account Preston did not know existed. Then I put everything back exactly where I found it. Preston would never know I had been there. The next morning, I called Bradford and Associates from a coffee shop 3 miles from the house. I did not trust the landlines, did not trust our internet, did not trust anything in the Whitmore world anymore. A man answered on the third ring. His voice was warm but cautious. Miss Bennett, this is Thomas Bradford. We have been trying to reach you for a very long time. I know. I am sorry. My mail was being delayed. I see. There was weight in those 2 words. Understanding. Miss Bennett, your grandfather, Henry James Bennett, passed away 18 months ago. He spent the last 20 years of his life trying to find you after your mother cut off contact with the family. I did not know I had a grandfather. Your mother had her reasons for leaving. I will not speak ill of the dead, but Henry never stopped looking for you. He never stopped hoping for a reconciliation. When he died, he left his entire estate to his only grandchild. You. My mouth went dry. What estate? $892 million. Real estate across the eastern seaboard, investment portfolios, a charitable foundation, all of it in trust, waiting for you to claim it. The coffee shop spun around me. I gripped the edge of the table to keep from falling. $892 million. Miss Bennett, are you still there? Yes. I need a moment. I understand this is a lot to process, but there are complications. If you do not claim this estate within 24 months of notification, it reverts to the state. Or if you were to be declared mentally incompetent, a guardian could claim on your behalf. The pieces clicked together in my mind. Like a husband. Exactly like a husband. Thomas Bradford's voice was careful, measured. Miss Bennett, may I ask you something directly? Yes. Is someone preventing you from receiving your mail? Because we sent over 30 certified letters to your address over the past 18 months. Every single one was returned as undeliverable. I closed my eyes, felt my daughter kick inside me, thought about Genevieve standing over that pile of returned letters, smiling her ice-cold smile. Mr. Bradford, I need to come to your office. Today, if possible. I need to claim this inheritance as soon as possible. And I need to know everything. Everything about my grandfather. Everything about my mother. Everything about why she really left. I will clear my schedule. But Miss Bennett, be careful. Do not tell anyone you have spoken with me. Do not tell anyone about this inheritance. Whoever has been blocking our communications clearly has reasons. And people with reasons can be dangerous. I understand. I was packing a bag to go to Bradford's office when the first contraction hit. Then my water broke, soaking through my dress and pooling on the kitchen floor. I called Preston. No answer. Called Genevieve. She told me she was in a meeting and to call an ambulance if I was really in labor. Then she hung up. Called Megan. My best friend since college. The only person in this world I trusted completely. I am on my way, she said immediately. Do not move. Do not panic. I am coming. Megan drove me to the hospital. She held my hand during the admission process. She stayed by my side through 19 hours of labor while my husband remained unreachable. Preston finally showed up at hour 16. His hair was messy. His clothes were wrinkled. He smelled like perfume that was not mine. "Sorry, babe," he said, leaning down to kiss my sweaty forehead. "My phone died. I got here as fast as I could. I was in too much pain to argue, too exhausted to fight. I just nodded and gripped the bed rails as another contraction tore through me. My daughter Lily was born at 3:47 in the morning on February 14th, Valentine's Day. She weighed 6 pounds, 8 ounces. She had a tuft of dark hair and the most perfect little fingers I had ever seen. The nurse placed her on my chest, and for one perfect moment, nothing else mattered. Not Preston's lies, not Genevieve's cruelty, not the inheritance or the conspiracy or any of it. Just this tiny, perfect human being who was mine to love and protect. Preston took photos for Instagram, posed with Lily for exactly 90 seconds, then handed her back to me. "I have to go," he said, already checking his phone. "Work thing? But you did great, babe. She is beautiful." It was 4 in the morning on Valentine's Day. His daughter had just been born, and he was leaving. That was the last time Preston would voluntarily hold his daughter. Day 3 after giving birth. I was recovering slowly. The delivery had been difficult. 19 hours of labor, 2 hours of pushing, and finally an emergency intervention when Lily's heart rate dropped. My body felt like it had been through a war. Lily slept in a bassinet beside my bed, her tiny face slightly yellow from jaundice. The doctor said it was common in newborns. Nothing to worry about. But I worried anyway. That is what mothers do. Megan visited every day. She worked as a nurse in the ICU downstairs, and she spent every break sitting with me, bringing me real food from the cafeteria, telling me stupid jokes to make me laugh. On day 3, she walked into my room with a look I had never seen before. Her face was pale. Her hands were trembling. She would not meet my eyes. "Claire," she said quietly, "I need to show you something. And I need you to stay calm." She handed me her phone. Instagram was already open. The photo filled the screen. Preston at a 5-star restaurant, the kind with white tablecloths and waiters in tuxedos. Beside him sat Natalie, the blonde woman from the party. Her hand rested on her very pregnant belly. Preston's arm was around her shoulder. Both of them were smiling at the camera like they had never been happier. The caption read, quote, "With my real family, finally honest, new beginnings," end quote. I stared at the screen. 47,000 likes, hundreds of comments. "Congratulations, Preston. You deserve happiness." Finally, the truth comes out. "So happy for you both. That other woman was always so wrong for you. Natalie is perfect." Some people had tagged me. Their comments were crueler. "Imagine being the wife and finding out like this. Embarrassing. She must have trapped him with a baby. Gold digger. Preston should sue for custody. That woman is crazy." I scrolled through the comments for a long time. Each one was a knife. Each one was a reminder of how the world saw me, not as a woman who had been betrayed, but as a punchline, a joke, a pathetic creature who deserved what she got. Megan took the phone from my hands. "Claire, look at me. Look at me." I looked at her. My eyes were dry. Something inside me had gone very still and very cold. "That baby she is carrying." I said quietly, "How far along does she look?" Megan hesitated. "I would say 7 or 8 months. Maybe more. We have been married for 3 years. Which means he was sleeping with her before you were even engaged." Megan's voice was bitter. "Claire, I am so sorry. I knew he was a terrible husband, but I never thought. I need you to do something for me. In my purse, there is a business card. Bradford and Associates. Call them. Tell them I need a meeting tomorrow morning. Tell them it is urgent." Megan nodded. "What are you going to do?" "I am going to take back what is mine." That night, at 11, I was almost asleep when my hospital room door opened. Genevieve walked in first. She was wearing a designer coat over silk pajamas, as if she had been dragged from bed for an emergency. But her makeup was perfect. Her hair was immaculate. This was not a woman who had been surprised by anything. Behind her came Richard, looking uncomfortable in a rumpled suit. Then Brooke, Preston's younger sister, with her phone already out and recording. And finally, 2 men I did not recognize. One was tall and thin, carrying a briefcase. The other was shorter, older, with the cold eyes of someone who made his living destroying people. "Claire, dear," Genevieve said, her voice dripping with false concern. "We need to discuss the future of this family." The tall man stepped forward. "Miss Whitmore, I am Dr. Robert Matthews. I am a psychiatrist specializing in postpartum mental health conditions. I have been asked to evaluate your current state." The shorter man handed me a stack of papers. "These are legal documents requesting an emergency custody evaluation. Your husband has expressed concerns about your mental stability and your ability to care for your newborn child." I looked at the documents. My name was everywhere, but nothing else was accurate. Claims that I had a history of mental illness. Claims that I had threatened to harm myself and my baby. Claims that I was delusional, paranoid, a danger to everyone around me. All of it lies. All of it fabricated. I set the papers down on the bed. I want these men out of my room. I want my doctor present. And I want hospital administration here before I say another word. Genevieve laughed. "Darling, we fund this hospital. The new cardiac wing has our name on it. Administration works for us." Brooke swung her phone toward me, the camera recording everything. "Hey, everyone." Her voice was bright and cruel. "Live from the hospital where my brother's crazy wife is having a total breakdown. Watch her try to steal his baby. Drama." I could see comments flooding the screen. People calling me names. People cheering Brooke on. Thousands of strangers watching my worst moment for entertainment. Something inside me snapped. Not into hysteria, into clarity. I looked directly at Brooke's camera. "For the record, my name is Claire Bennett Whitmore. I gave birth 3 days ago to a healthy baby girl. I have not been evaluated by any physician as mentally unfit. These people entered my hospital room at 11 at night without my consent, and I am formally requesting that they leave immediately." I turned to look at the corner of the room, where a small red light blinked. I am also noting for the hospital's security footage, which is recording right now, that any attempt to remove my child from this room without proper legal documentation will be considered kidnapping. Connecticut takes kidnapping very seriously, even for families who donate hospital wings. Genevieve's smile flickered. Her eyes went to the camera in the corner. For just a moment, I saw uncertainty. I pressed my advantage. "Dr. Matthews, I assume you are licensed to practice in Connecticut. I would hate to have to report you to the medical board for attempting to conduct an evaluation without patient consent. That is a serious ethical violation." The psychiatrist shifted uncomfortably. He looked at Genevieve. "Perhaps," he said carefully, "we should schedule a formal evaluation during business hours, through proper channels." Genevieve's face tightened, but she nodded. "Of course," she gathered her coat around her. "We just wanted to make sure you were all right, dear. Family looks out for family." She leaned close to my ear as she passed. "You think you are clever," she whispered. "Your mother thought she was clever too. Look how that ended." Then they were gone. The door closed behind them. The room was silent except for Lily's soft breathing and the beeping of monitors. I lay there in the dark, my heart pounding, my hands shaking. If you have ever had someone try to take everything from you, if you have ever been told you are crazy when you know you are not, then you understand what I felt in that moment. It is not just fear. It is the terrifying realization that the people who are supposed to love you are the ones you need protection from. I called Thomas Bradford at midnight. "Mr. Bradford, I need to claim that inheritance tomorrow, first thing in the morning, and I need to know everything about how my mother died." Thomas Bradford arrived at the hospital the next morning at 8 sharp. He was a distinguished man in his late 50s, silver hair combed back neatly, wire-rimmed glasses perched on his nose. He carried a leather briefcase that looked older than I was and moved with the quiet confidence of someone who had seen everything and was surprised by nothing. He closed the door behind him and checked the hallway twice before sitting down. "Miss Bennett," he said, his voice low, "before we discuss the inheritance, there are things you need to know. Things about your mother. Things about the Whitmore family. Things that will change how you see everything." I was sitting up in bed, Lily asleep in my arms. My body still ached. My mind was exhausted. But something in Bradford's tone made me sit up straighter. "Tell me everything." He opened his briefcase and pulled out a thick folder. Inside were photographs, documents, newspaper clippings from decades ago. Your mother, Catherine Bennett, Did not die in a random car accident. He handed me a photograph. Catherine at 19, beautiful and bright-eyed, standing beside a young Genevieve Whitmore. They were both laughing. They looked like best friends. My mother knew Genevieve. They went to boarding school together. Bradford handed me another photo. Catherine was supposed to marry Richard Whitmore. It was an arranged match between two wealthy families. Your grandfather, Henry Bennett, and Richard's father had been business partners for years. The marriage would have merged two empires. But she did not marry Richard. No, she fell in love with someone else, a young man named James who worked as a groundskeeper on the Bennett estate. Your father, I had never known my father. He left when I was 2 years old. My mother never spoke about him. I had always assumed he was just another deadbeat dad who could not handle responsibility. They ran away together. Bradford continued. Catherine gave up everything. Her inheritance, her family, her future. Henry was furious. He disowned her completely, told everyone she was dead to him. That sounds like what she told me, that her parents died before I was born. She was protecting you and protecting herself. She was too proud to go back, even when things got hard. Even when James abandoned her. Even when she was working 3 jobs just to keep food on the table. I remembered those years, the tiny apartments, the second-hand clothes, my mother coming home exhausted at midnight and leaving again before dawn. All those years of struggle, and she had been sitting on a fortune she refused to claim. What happened to change things? Time and regret. Bradford's voice softened. About 5 years before your mother died, Henry reached out to her. He was getting older. He had spent 20 years being angry, and he was tired of it. He wanted to reconcile, wanted to meet you. Did she agree eventually? It took months of letters back and forth, but finally Catherine agreed to bring you to meet him. They set a date, November 17th. That date meant nothing to me. Your mother died on November 10th, Bradford said quietly. 1 week before the meeting, my blood went cold. Her car went off a bridge during a rainstorm. The official report called it an accident. Wet roads, poor visibility, driver error, case closed. But you do not believe that. Bradford pulled out another document. Police report from the accident investigation. A witness saw another vehicle following your mother's car that night. A dark pickup truck with a broken taillight. The witness said it looked like the truck was chasing her. When your mother's car went off the bridge, the truck stopped, watched for a moment, then drove away. Did they ever find the truck? They traced the license plate. It was registered to a vehicle owned by James Bennett. Your father. The room tilted. I clutched Lily tighter. My father killed my mother. I cannot prove that. No one can. The lead detective on the case was paid off to close it as an accident. That detective now works for Whitmore Industries as a security consultant. The Whitmores were involved. I believe so. Bradford pulled out financial records. Your father, James Bennett, is alive. He has been living in New Hampshire under his own name for 25 years. And for the past 3 years, he has been in regular contact with the Whitmore family. 3 years, the exact length of my marriage. The picture finally became clear. James killed my mother to prevent her from reconciling with Henry. He thought he would inherit her share of the Bennett fortune. But Henry changed his will after Catherine's death, left everything to you, the granddaughter he never got to meet. So James has been trying to get to me, through the Whitmores. Your husband did not meet you by accident. Miss Bennett, that charity gala where you met Preston, the Whitmores specifically sought you out. They knew about your inheritance before you did. They have spent 3 years positioning themselves to take everything. I looked down at Lily's sleeping face. My daughter. Born into a web of lies and murder and greed. What do I do first? We claim your inheritance. Today, I have the paperwork ready. Once you sign, the money is legally yours, and no one can contest it. And then we make sure you and your daughter are safe. The Whitmores are desperate. They are $47 million in debt. Your inheritance is their only way out. Desperate people do desperate things. We spent the next hour signing documents. By 10 in the morning, I was officially the heir to $892 million. More money than I could comprehend. More money than the Whitmores could ever touch. But money means nothing if you cannot keep your daughter safe. I discharged myself against medical advice. Bradford had arranged a safe house. a small apartment in a neighboring town where the Whitmores had no connections. But Preston was waiting at the hospital exit. He stood by the main doors with two security guards flanking him. His face was a mask of concern that did not reach his eyes. "Claire, Queen," he said, stepping toward me. "What are you doing? You need rest. The doctor said you should stay another day. The doctor said I could leave whenever I wanted." I kept walking, Lily in my arms, Bradford beside me. Preston blocked my path. "Please, just come home. We can talk about everything. I know you are upset about the Instagram thing, but it is not what you think. Natalie is just a friend. The baby is not mine." The lies came so easily to him. 3 years of marriage, and I had never noticed how smoothly he could lie. "I know about the inheritance." "Preston," his face went pale. "I know your family has been intercepting my mail for 18 months. I know about the debt. I know about the plan to steal my money through a custody battle. And I know about my mother." "Claire, wait." His voice turned desperate. "You do not understand. My mother, she forced me into this. I never wanted to hurt you. I actually fell in love with you somewhere along the way. I swear. You fell in love with me." I laughed, and the sound was bitter enough to sting. "You have been sleeping with Natalie since before we got engaged. You posted pictures with her while I was giving birth to your daughter. You let your family try to have me committed last night. I had to. You do not know what my mother is capable of. She would destroy me if I did not go along with her plans. So you chose to destroy me instead." I stepped around him. He grabbed my arm. "You cannot leave." His voice dropped low. "If you walk out that door, I will file for emergency custody. I will tell the court you are mentally unstable, that you kidnapped our daughter, that you are a danger to yourself and others. My family has judges, doctors, police on our payroll. You will never see Lily again." I looked at his hand on my arm. Then I looked at his face. This man I had married. This man I had loved. This man who was threatening to take my child because I would not let him steal my money. "Let go of me." "Preston." He tightened his grip. Bradford stepped forward. "Mr. Whitmore, I am Thomas Bradford, attorney for Miss Bennett. If you do not release my client immediately, I will have you arrested for assault. And I should mention that everything happening right now is being recorded." He held up his phone. The camera was running. Preston's grip loosened, but his eyes promised violence. "This is not over," he said. "No," I agreed. "It is not." Megan was waiting in the parking lot with her car running. I climbed into the back seat with Lily. Bradford followed in his own vehicle. We made it 3 miles before I saw the black SUV in the rearview mirror. "Megan," I said quietly, "I think we are being followed." She glanced in the mirror. Her face went tight. "Hold on." She turned onto a side road, trying to lose them. The SUV followed. She took another turn, then another. The SUV stayed with us. We were on a back road, surrounded by bare winter trees. When the SUV accelerated, it slammed into our rear bumper. The car fishtailed on the icy road. Megan fought the wheel, trying to maintain control. The SUV hit us again, harder. The car spun. I curled around Lily, trying to protect her with my body. Megan screamed. Glass shattered. Metal crunched. We hit a snowbank and stopped. For a moment, everything was silent. Then Lily started crying. That high-pitched newborn wail that meant she was scared but not hurt. Megan was slumped over the steering wheel. Blood ran down her forehead from a gash above her eye. She was breathing but unconscious. My door was yanked open. 2 men in ski masks. One grabbed my arms. The other reached for Lily. "No." The word came out as a scream. "No, please, do not take her. Please." I fought. I kicked. I scratched. But I was 3 days postpartum, weak from blood loss and exhaustion. The man pulled Lily from my arms like taking candy from a child. The second man hit me. I fell into the snow. The cold burned my skin. Blood from a cut on my head stained the white ground red. I watched through fading vision as they carried my daughter to the SUV. She was screaming, reaching for me. "Please," I whispered. "Please give her back. Please." The SUV doors slammed. The engine revved. The vehicle disappeared into the blizzard. I lay in the snow for a long time. Maybe minutes. Maybe hours. The cold seeped into my bones. My vision faded in and out. In those minutes, I made myself 3 promises. I would find my daughter. I would destroy the people who took her. And I would never, ever be helpless again. I woke up in a hospital bed 5 days later. Not the Whitmore-funded hospital, a small county facility where the fluorescent lights buzzed and the walls were painted a depressing shade of green. A man sat in a chair beside my bed reading a newspaper. He was in his late 40s, with a weathered face and tired eyes that had seen too much. "You are awake," he said, folding the paper. "Good." I was starting to worry. "Who are you?" My voice came out as a croak. "Frank Morrison, retired detective. I work security here now." He leaned forward. "I was doing my rounds when the ambulance brought you in 5 days ago. You were half frozen, covered in blood, kept mumbling about your baby. Lily." I tried to sit up. "Where is my daughter?" Morrison's face told me everything I needed to know before he spoke. "The police are investigating, but it is complicated." He paused. "Someone called in an anonymous tip right after your accident, said you were a mentally unstable woman who crashed her car while fleeing with an infant, said you were a danger to yourself and your child." "That is a lie, I know. I read the medical reports. You were assaulted, not crazy. But the tip triggered a Child Protective Services response, and CPS placed the baby with the father's family pending investigation. The Whitmores have Lily." "I am afraid so." I finally managed to sit up. Pain radiated through my body. My shoulder was bandaged where it had been dislocated and relocated. My head throbbed from what the doctor said was a moderate concussion. None of that mattered. Only Lily mattered. How do I get her back? That is the complicated part. Morrison pulled his chair closer. CPS does not just hand babies back because the mother asks nicely. There needs to be an investigation. Court hearings. The whole process takes months, sometimes years. I do not have months. Those people are dangerous. They killed my mother. They tried to kill me. Morrison studied me for a long moment. "You are the Bennett heiress. Are you not the one who inherited the old man's fortune?" "You know about that. I was a detective for 25 years. I make it my business to know things." He leaned back. "I also know the Whitmores have been buying judges and cops in this state for decades. Whatever money and evidence you have, they will find ways to make it disappear." "Then what do I do?" He was quiet for a moment. Then he pulled a card from his pocket and handed it to me. "You hire me. I am not cheap, but I am good. And more importantly, I cannot be bought." Thomas Bradford arrived an hour later with more bad news. During my 5 days of unconsciousness, the Whitmores had moved fast. Preston filed for emergency custody, claiming I had suffered a psychotic break and endangered our daughter. A judge named Patricia Winters granted temporary custody to the Whitmores pending psychiatric evaluation of me. The inheritance was frozen. Someone had filed a motion claiming I was mentally incompetent to manage a large estate, so they took my daughter and my money. They took your daughter. The money. They are working on it, but your grandfather anticipated something like this. There is a protective trust provision. They cannot touch the money until you are declared permanently incompetent, which takes years of legal proceedings. So I need to stay legally sane. You need to fight. Every single day. Every hearing. Every evaluation. Every motion. You cannot give them an inch. And I need to get my daughter back. That will be harder. Judge Winters is compromised. The Whitmores have donated heavily to her campaigns for years. Any case heard in her courtroom will not go our way. Then we need to take it out of her courtroom. 2 weeks later, I stood in Connecticut Family Court for my first custody hearing. I was still weak, still healing, but I forced myself to stand straight, to look strong, to show no weakness. I had evidence. Medical records proving I was assaulted, bank records showing the Whitmores' debt, documentation of their conspiracy to steal my inheritance. I thought I had enough to win. Judge Winters ruled against me. "The court finds," she said, her voice flat and bored, "that the petitioner's claims of assault are unverified by independent witnesses. The respondent's concerns about the petitioner's mental state are supported by preliminary psychiatric evaluation. Furthermore, the petitioner's recent inheritance of a substantial sum suggests possible manic episode or impaired judgment." I stood there, unable to believe what I was hearing. Custody of the minor child will remain with the father and his family pending full psychiatric evaluation of the mother. The mother is granted supervised visitation of 2 hours per week. Any violation of these terms will result in immediate termination of visitation rights. Your Honor, I said, my voice shaking. They kidnapped my daughter. They ran my car off the road. They have been intercepting my mail for 18 months. Miss Whitmore, Judge Winter's voice was sharp. One more outburst and I will hold you in contempt. These accusations are serious and require evidence, not hysterics. This hearing is adjourned. I watched Genevieve carry Lily out of the courtroom. My daughter was crying, reaching her tiny hands toward me, and I could not go to her, could not hold her, could not tell her that Mommy was still fighting. Outside the courthouse, I sat on a cold bench and stared at nothing. Morrison sat beside me. He did not say anything for a long time. That judge is dirty. He finally said, I know it. You know it. But knowing and proving are different things. So what do? We dig deeper. Find evidence that cannot be ignored. Find witnesses who cannot be bought. Build a case so strong that even a corrupt judge cannot dismiss it. And if we cannot, then we find a way to take this out of Connecticut entirely. Federal court, FBI, whatever it takes. He handed me a small memory card. I found something. Before they took everything from my storage unit, I kept one copy hidden. On me. What is it? Your mother's original case file. The real investigation. Before it was buried. Names, dates, witnesses, everything. I looked at the tiny chip in my hand. It did not look like much. A piece of plastic smaller than my thumbnail. But it was hope. And hope was all I had left. 3 months. That is how long it took to build a case. 3 months of sleepless nights and endless documents. 3 months of Morrison digging through records and tracking down witnesses. 3 months of Bradford filing motions and fighting legal battles. 3 months of supervised visits where I got to hold my daughter for 2 hours while a social worker watched my every move. I used my inheritance to build an army. Investigators, attorneys from New York who had no ties to Connecticut politics, private security to make sure I was not run off any more roads, forensic accountants to trace the Whitmore money. The picture that emerged was damning. Judge Patricia Winters had received over $200,000 in campaign donations from Whitmore shell companies over the past decade. Dr. Robert Matthews, the psychiatrist who claimed I was mentally unstable, had lost his medical license in Vermont 3 years earlier for falsifying psychiatric evaluations. He was practicing in Connecticut under a restored license that the Whitmores had helped him obtain. The security firm that ran us off the road was owned by a company that was owned by another company that was ultimately owned by Whitmore Industries. The men who took Lily were on the Whitmore payroll. And most damning of all, the detective who had buried my mother's murder investigation was now head of security for Whitmore Industries. We had everything, documents, witnesses, financial records, a case so strong that no honest judge could dismiss it. My attorneys filed motions for judicial misconduct, fraudulent expert testimony, and conspiracy to commit kidnapping. For the first time in 3 months, I felt hope. On the day before the hearing, I visited Lily during my supervised visitation. She was 4 months old now, growing so fast. She smiled when she saw me, reached for me with chubby little hands. Mama is going to bring you home. Baby, I whispered while the social worker pretended not to listen. I promise, just a little longer. That night, someone knocked on my apartment door. I checked the security camera. Genevieve Whitmore stood in the hallway. Alone, no lawyers, no security. Just an old woman in an expensive coat. I opened the door. May I come in? She did not wait for an answer. Walked past me into the living room, sat down on my couch like she owned it. You have done well, she said. Better than I expected. Better than your mother. Certainly. Do not talk about my mother. Catherine was my friend. Claire. Before everything went wrong, Genevieve's voice was different, tired, almost human. We grew up together. Did you know that our families were connected for generations? She was supposed to marry Richard. Instead, she ran off with the help and broke both our families apart. I do not care about ancient history. You should, because ancient history is why we are here. Genevieve pulled out a folder and handed it to me. I am not your enemy. Claire, I never was. I was just trying to protect my family. Protect your family by stealing my inheritance, by kidnapping my daughter, by trying to have me committed, by making sure my son did not make the same mistake his father almost made. Genevieve's eyes were cold. Richard loved Catherine, really loved her. When she ran away with James, it nearly destroyed him. He married me on the rebound. A loveless arrangement between two families who needed each other's money. I have spent 40 years in a marriage with a man who wishes I was someone else. I do not see how that is my problem. It is not. But it explains why I did what I did. I saw Preston falling for you, really falling, and I could not let him throw away everything for love the way his father almost did. So you arranged for him to seduce me for my money instead. I arranged for him to marry someone appropriate, someone who could save our family from financial ruin. The fact that he actually developed feelings for you was an unfortunate complication. I stared at her. This woman who had tormented me for 3 years, who had tried to destroy me, and she was talking about it like a business transaction that had gone slightly wrong. What do you want? Genevieve, I want to make a deal. She leaned forward. You want your daughter. I want my son, free from Natalie Carson, who has been running a con on him since the day they met. And I want James Bennett to pay for what he did to Catherine. You know about my father I have known for 25 years. I was the one Catherine was driving to meet the night she died. She called me that afternoon. Said she had proof that James was planning something terrible. She was bringing the evidence to me. And you never told anyone. Who would I tell? The police were bought off within a week. Henry Bennett was too consumed by grief to listen to conspiracy theories. And I had my own family to protect. So you just let him get away with murder. I let him think he got away with it. There is a difference. Genevieve smiled coldly. James has been trying to get his hands on the Bennett fortune for 25 years, working with my husband, with Preston, with anyone who would help him. He is the real enemy. Claire, not me. Why should I believe anything you say? Because I have proof. She pointed to the folder she had given me. Everything is in there. Recordings of James discussing the original plan with Richard, financial records showing payments to the detective who buried the investigation, and the location of the witness who saw James's truck following Catherine's car that night. I opened the folder, read through the documents. If this was real, it changed everything. What do you want in return? I want you to destroy James Bennett, publicly, completely, permanently. And I want you to let Preston go. No prosecution, no prison, just a quiet divorce and shared custody of Lily. Why would I agree to that? Because Preston is weak, not evil. He did what I told him to do because he was too afraid to say no. I made him this way. If anyone deserves to be punished, it is me. She stood up. Think about it. You have 24 hours. After that, my offer expires, and we go back to being enemies. She walked to the door, paused. Your mother was the bravest person I ever knew. She said quietly, she gave up everything for love. It destroyed her, but she never regretted it. You have her courage. Claire, use it wisely. Then she was gone. I sat alone in my apartment, staring at the folder full of evidence, trying to figure out if this was a trap or an opportunity. By morning, I had made my decision. I called Genevieve. I believe you, about my father, about what he did. Then we can help each other. I am not your friend. I do not forgive you for what you have done to me, but my father needs to answer for what he did to my mother. And Preston thought about the man I had married, about the man who had betrayed me, about the man who was, as his mother said, weak rather than evil. Your son signed custody papers giving me full custody of Lily. He gets therapy. He actually changes. In 2 years. If he is a different person, we can discuss supervised visitation. But if he ever tries to take her from me again, I will bury all of you. Agreed. Then we have a deal. It was the biggest mistake of my life. The morning of the hearing, I woke up confident. We had everything. Evidence, witnesses, documentation. The Whitmore conspiracy laid bare for everyone to see. My lead attorney called at 7 in the morning. Claire, his voice was strange, tight. I need you to come to my office immediately. We have a problem. What kind of problem? The kind I cannot discuss on the phone. Just come. Now, I arrived at his office 30 minutes later. He was sitting behind his desk with his head in his hands. When he looked up, his face was pale. I am sorry, he said. I cannot represent you anymore. What are you talking about? The hearing is in 3 hours. He slid his phone across the desk. On the screen was a photograph. his teenage daughter, Emma, walking out of her high school. The text beneath it read, quote, "Drop the case or she does not come home," end quote. They threatened your daughter. They did more than threaten. He pulled up another photo. His car, windows smashed, tires slashed, a note on the windshield that read, quote, "This is just the beginning," end quote. Call the police. And tell them what? That I am being threatened because I am trying to take down the most powerful family in Connecticut. He laughed bitterly. Claire, I have a family and I cannot risk them. None of us can. What do you mean? None of us? I called my associates this morning. All 5 of them received similar threats. One had his home broken into. Another found a dead rat in his mailbox. They got to everyone on your legal team. I stared at him. Everything we built. 3 months of work. Gone in one night. What about the evidence? That is the other thing. He pulled out an empty folder. The backup copies we kept in the secure storage facility. Someone broke in last night. Everything is gone. Hard drives, paper files, all of it. I called Morrison. He answered on the second ring. Please tell me you have copies of everything. Silence. Morrison. They hit my place too. His voice was rough. Around 2 in the morning, 3 guys in masks, took everything I had, beat the hell out of me when I tried to stop them. Are you okay? I will live. But Claire, we have nothing now. Whatever we were going to present today, it is gone. I went to the hearing anyway. Alone, no attorneys, no evidence, no witnesses. I asked Judge Winters for a continuance, explained that my legal team had been threatened, that evidence had been stolen. She denied the motion. Miss Whitmore, she said, her voice dripping with condescension, this court has already granted you multiple extensions. Your inability to retain counsel is not the court's concern. We will proceed. Preston's attorneys presented their case. Expert testimony claiming my inheritance was evidence of mental instability. Witnesses saying I had been stalking the family, sending threatening messages, behaving erratically, photos of me looking disheveled and crazy, taken during my hospitalization after the car accident. I tried to object, tried to explain. Judge Winters shut me down every time. Then the courtroom doors opened, and my father walked in. I had not seen him since I was 2 years old. I did not recognize his face, but I knew who he was the moment our eyes met. James Bennett, the man who killed my mother. Your Honor, he said, approaching the witness by end, I am the petitioner's biological father. I am here to provide testimony regarding her mental state. Preston's attorney smiled. Please, Mr. Bennett, tell the court what you know. James sat in the witness chair and looked directly at me. His eyes were cold, empty, like looking at a shark. My daughter Claire has a history of mental instability. He said, her mother suffered from similar delusions. Paranoia, conspiracy theories, belief that everyone was out to get her. I tried to help them both, but neither would accept treatment. Catherine refused medication until the day she died. I fear Claire is heading down the same path. You abandoned us when I was 2 years old. I shouted, bah! You killed my mother. Judge Winters banged her gavel. Miss Whitmore, one more outburst and I will have you removed. James continued his testimony. Calm, measured, convincing. He painted a picture of a delusional woman raised by a delusional mother, a tragic case of inherited mental illness. When he finished, Judge Winters delivered her ruling. Based on the testimony presented today, this court finds that the petitioner poses a significant risk to the minor child. Full custody is granted to the father. Preston Whitmore. Visitation for the mother is suspended pending psychiatric evaluation. If the mother fails to complete the evaluation within 30 days, custody will become permanent. The gavel came down. Final. Absolute. I watched them carry Lily out of the courtroom. This time, she did not reach for me. She did not even look. She had forgotten me already. Outside the courthouse, I collapsed on a bench. I had lost everything, my daughter, my evidence, my chance at justice. Morrison found me there an hour later. His face was bruised. His arm was in a sling, but he was smiling. It is not over, he said. I stared at him. How can you say that? We have nothing left. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a tiny memory card. Remember that chip I gave you, your mother's case file? I nodded. I made a copy before they took everything, kept it somewhere they could not find. Where he grinned, swallowed it, Had to wait a couple days to get it back. But here it is. I looked at the chip in his hand, covered in God knows what, but intact. Your father made a mistake today, Morrison said. He went on record, under oath, told specific lies about specific events. And I have evidence that proves every single one of those lies was fabricated. He sat beside me. Liars always slip eventually. Your father just slipped. Now we make him pay. We set up operations in a motel room 60 miles outside of Connecticut. Cash only. No credit cards. No digital trail. Morrison swept the room for bugs twice before we started. The memory card contained everything. My mother's original case file, witness statements, photographs, financial records, the entire investigation that had been buried 25 years ago. We spread it all out on the bed and started connecting the dots. The night your mother died, Morrison said, pointing to a faded police report. A witness named Anna Campbell saw a dark pickup truck following her car for 3 miles before the accident. The witness reported the license plate to police. It matched a vehicle registered to James Bennett, my father's truck. The original detective, a man named Reynolds, interviewed the witness once, then she disappeared from the file. No follow-up, no additional statement, nothing. What happened to her? Morrison pulled out another document. She moved to Florida 2 weeks after the accident, changed her name, lived quietly for 20 years. He looked at me. I found her. She is still alive, and she is willing to testify. After 25 years, she has been carrying this guilt for a long time. She knew something was wrong, knew the investigation was buried, but she was scared. A single mother with 2 kids. She could not afford to fight the system. He handed me a phone number. She wants to make it right. I called Anna Campbell that night. Her voice was thin and tired, the voice of someone who had spent decades looking over her shoulder. I saw everything. She said that truck was chasing her. When her car went off the bridge, it stopped. A man got out and watched, just stood there in the rain, watching her car sink. Then he got back into the truck and drove away. Did you see his face? It was dark, raining, but I saw him clearly when he got out of the truck. He was smiling. Miss Bennett, your mother was drowning, and he was smiling. I closed my eyes, breathed through the rage. Will you testify in court? Yes. I should have done it 25 years ago. I should have fought harder, but I was scared. They threatened my children, told me to forget what I saw or my kids would pay. She paused. Your mother deserves justice. So do you. We built the case piece by piece. Anna Campbell's testimony. Financial records showing payments from Whitmore Industries to the original detective. Phone records proving James Bennett had been in contact with the Whitmores for years. The fake psychiatric evaluation that Dr. Robert Matthews had used against me, with documentation proving he had lost his license in Vermont for the exact same crime. But we did not take it to Connecticut courts. Morrison was right. The state was too corrupted by Whitmore money. Instead, we went federal. The FBI office in New Haven was staffed by agents who had no ties to Greenwich politics. I walked in with Bradford and Morrison and laid everything on the table. The agent in charge, a woman named Margaret Foster, listened without interrupting. When I finished, she looked at me with steady eyes. Miss Bennett, she said, if what you are telling me is true, this is one of the largest corruption cases in Connecticut history. Murder, conspiracy, bribery, kidnapping, witness tampering. It crosses state lines, which makes it federal jurisdiction. It is all true, every word. She studied the evidence for a long moment. Then she picked up her phone. Get me a warrant team, she said. We are going to Connecticut. 3 weeks later, the arrest began. FBI agents took James Bennett from his New Hampshire home at 6 in the morning. He was still in his pajamas when they put the handcuffs on him. The charges included murder in the 2nd degree, conspiracy to commit murder, wire fraud, and witness tampering. The same day, Richard Whitmore was arrested at Whitmore Industries headquarters. Conspiracy, obstruction of justice, bribery of public officials. He did not resist, just nodded quietly and let them lead him away. Detective Reynolds, the man who had buried my mother's case, was arrested at his home. His wife screamed at the agents. His neighbors came out to watch. The whole thing was captured by news cameras and broadcast on every channel. Judge Patricia Winters resigned before she could be arrested. The State Bar Association opened an investigation. Her career was over. Dr. Robert Matthews lost his license permanently. Criminal charges were pending. The Whitmore empire crumbled in a matter of days. Creditors called in their loans. Business partners fled. The stock price of their remaining companies dropped to nothing. And through it all, I watched from a distance, waiting, planning, because the arrests were just the beginning. I still had to get my daughter back. The custody hearing took place 3 weeks after the arrests. Different judge, different courtroom, different outcome. Judge Richard Blackwell was a veteran of the federal bench, appointed specifically to oversee the case because of the corruption in the state system. He had no ties to the Whitmores, no history of accepting donations, no reason to rule anything but fairly. I sat at the plaintiff's table with Bradford beside me. Across the aisle, Preston sat alone. No family, no expensive attorneys, just a broken man in a wrinkled suit who could not meet my eyes. The hearing lasted 2 hours. Bradford presented the evidence, the kidnapping, the conspiracy, the threats against my legal team, the fraudulent psychiatric evaluations. Preston's court-appointed attorney barely mounted a defense. There was nothing to defend. Judge Blackwell delivered his ruling without hesitation. Based on the evidence presented, this court finds that the respondent and his family engaged in a systematic campaign of harassment, intimidation, and illegal activity against the petitioner. Full custody of the minor child is hereby granted to the mother. The father is granted no visitation rights pending the outcome of criminal proceedings against his family. The gavel came down, and just like that, it was over. A social worker brought Lily to me in a small room adjacent to the courtroom. She was 5 months old now, bigger than I remembered. Her eyes were the same dark blue as mine. She looked at me. For a long moment, she did not react, did not reach for me, did not smile. My heart broke. She had forgotten me. Then something shifted in her face. Recognition, memory, something deep and primal that connected us beyond words. She reached for me. Her tiny hands grabbed at my shirt. She made a sound that was almost a word. Mama. I held her, cried into her hair, promised her 1,000 things I would spend the rest of my life trying to keep. We are going home, baby, I whispered. Mama is never letting you go again. Outside the courthouse, cameras flashed. Reporters shouted questions. The story was everywhere now. Billionaire heiress takes down corrupt dynasty. Justice finally served after 25 years. For 48 hours, I was a hero. The coverage was overwhelmingly positive. People praised my courage, my persistence, my refusal to give up. Then the backlash started. It began with opinion pieces. Is Claire Bennett a victim or a villain? Shane? Headline asked. The dark side of billionaire justice. Read another. Social media turned. People who had never met me, who knew nothing about my story, suddenly had opinions. She is just a rich woman using her money to destroy a family. The Whitmores made mistakes, but they do not deserve to be ruined. Claire Bennett is vindictive and cruel. Preston gave an interview to a morning show. He sat on a couch looking thin and sad, tears streaming down his face. I made terrible mistakes, he said. I was weak. I let my family control me. But I loved Claire. I loved our daughter. And now I have lost everything. He wiped his eyes. I am not asking for sympathy, and I just want people to know that I am sorry. I am getting help. I am trying to be better. The comments on the interview were overwhelmingly sympathetic. Poor Preston. He was a victim too. Claire should forgive him. Then Natalie Carson reappeared. She had been missing for weeks, ever since the FBI started making arrests. Everyone assumed she had fled the country. Instead, she walked into a television studio and gave the performance of her life. Claire Whitmore threatened me. She said, tears running down her perfect face. She hired people to dig into my past. She destroyed my reputation. She told Preston lies about me to break us apart. She paused, lip trembling. I was pregnant with Preston's baby. The stress she caused made me lose it. I had a miscarriage because of her. The studio audience gasped. The host looked horrified. This is not justice, Natalie continued. This is a wealthy woman using her money to destroy anyone who gets in her way. I am not a villain. I am a victim. We are all victims of Claire Bennett's revenge. The interview went viral. Within hours, The narrative had shifted completely. I was not a survivor seeking justice. I was a vindictive billionaire crushing innocent people beneath my heel. Morrison called me that night. "We have a problem." He said, "Natalie's story is playing. People believe her." I watched the news coverage, comment sections full of hatred, think pieces analyzing my psychology, strangers on the internet calling me a monster. I had won everything, and somehow I was still losing. I thought about responding, giving interviews, fighting back in the court of public opinion. Then I looked at Lily, sleeping peacefully in her crib. My daughter, safe, home, mine. And I realized something important. I did not need the world to love me. I did not need strangers to understand. I did not need to win every battle. I just needed to be a good mother, to raise my daughter with love and kindness and strength, to build a life that was not defined by the people who had tried to destroy me. Let them say what they want. I told Morrison, I am done fighting for approval. I have my daughter. I have the truth. That is enough. Are you sure? I have never been more sure of anything. I turned off the television, deleted social media from my phone, and I started building a new life. The trials took 18 months. James Bennett was convicted of second-degree murder in the death of Catherine Bennett. The jury deliberated for 6 hours before returning a guilty verdict. The judge sentenced him to 25 years in federal prison. I was in the courtroom when the verdict was read. I watched my father's face as he realized his life was over. He looked at me once. His eyes were empty. No remorse, no regret, just the cold calculation of a man who had never loved anyone but himself. I felt nothing. I had expected rage, or satisfaction, or grief. Instead, there was just a hollow space where those emotions should have been. Some wounds do not heal. You just learn to carry them. Richard Whitmore pleaded guilty to conspiracy and obstruction of justice. He received 8 years in federal prison. At his sentencing, he made a brief statement. "I spent my entire life doing what other people told me to do." He said, "My father, my wife. I never had the courage to stand up for what was right. I am not asking for forgiveness. I just want my granddaughter to know someday that I am sorry." Genevieve Whitmore was never charged. She had been careful to stay on the right side of the legal, letting others do her dirty work while keeping her own hands clean. But the civil suits destroyed her. Wrongful death, conspiracy, intentional infliction of emotional distress. By the time the lawyers finished, she had nothing left. I heard she moved to a small apartment in Bridgeport, works part-time at a department store. The queen of Greenwich society, reduced to folding sweaters for minimum wage. Preston took a plea deal on lesser charges: probation, community service, mandatory therapy. He signed custody papers giving me full legal and physical custody of Lily. He was allowed supervised visitation once a month, if I approved. The first time he came to visit, 6 months after the trial, I almost did not let him in. He stood on my doorstep looking like a different person. Thinner, older. Something in his eyes that had not been there before. Something that looked almost like genuine remorse. "I know I do not deserve to see her," he said quietly. "I know I do not deserve anything from you. But she is my daughter, and I would like the chance to be something other than a monster in her memory." I thought about slamming the door, thought about all the pain he had caused, thought about the years of lies and betrayal and cruelty. Then I thought about Lily, growing up without a father, asking questions I could not answer, wondering if she was unlovable because the man who was supposed to love her chose not to. 1 hour, I said, supervised. If you upset her, you leave and you do not come back. Thank you. He sat on the floor with Lily and played with blocks. He did not try to hold her, did not try to force affection, just sat there building towers and knocking them down, laughing when she laughed. When the hour was over, he stood up and walked to the door. "I am sorry," he said, "for everything. I know that does not fix anything, but I need you to know that I am sorry." I nodded, did not say anything. He left. The visits continued, once a month, then twice. Slowly, carefully. We built something that was not forgiveness, but was not hatred either. Something that let Lily have a father. Even if that father was deeply flawed, I never trusted him again. Never forgot what he had done, but I learned to let it go of the rage, because carrying it was heavier than setting it down. 6 months after the trials ended, I moved to Vermont, a small town where nobody knew my name or my story. A modest house with a big yard where Lily could run and play. I put most of the inheritance into a trust, took a small salary for living expenses. The rest went to a foundation I created in my mother's name. Legal defense for women in abusive situations, scholarships for single mothers, advocacy for reforming family court systems that let corruption flourish. Megan visited on weekends. She had fully recovered from the accident, though she still had a scar on her forehead that she called her battle wound. She was the godmother Lily deserved. One evening, we sat on the porch watching the sunset. Lily was inside, asleep in her crib. The air smelled like pine and wood smoke. You could live anywhere. Megan said, Paris, New York, anywhere in the world. Why Vermont? Because I spent my whole life trying to be enough. I said, trying to be seen, trying to be worthy of love. By my father, who abandoned me. By Preston, who never loved me at all. By Genevieve, who saw me as nothing but an obstacle. I watched the sun sink below the mountains. I do not need to be seen anymore. I said, I do not need to be big or important or impressive. I just need to be enough for her. I glanced toward the house where my daughter slept. That is all that matters now. Megan reached over and squeezed my hand. For what it is worth, she said. I think you have always been enough. You just needed to believe it yourself. That night, after Megan left, I went into Lily's room and watched her sleep. She was a year old now, healthy, happy, growing into a person who would never have to wonder if she was loved. One day, I would tell her the whole story about her grandmother, Catherine, who was brave enough to give up everything for love, about her great-grandfather, Henry, who spent 20 years regretting the things he never said, about the family that tried to destroy us, and how we survived anyway. But not yet. For now, she was just a baby who needed her mother, and I was just a woman who had learned the hardest lesson of all. You cannot control what other people do to you. You cannot control whether they love you or hate you, whether they lift you up or tear you down. The only thing you can control is what you do next, how you respond, who you become. They threw me in the snow when I had nothing. They called me garbage. They said I would never be anything. They were wrong, and I am not a billionaire. That money sits in a trust, doing good in the world while I live simply and quietly. I am not famous. The news cycle moved on long ago, and nobody remembers my name. I am just a mother, living in a small town, raising a daughter who will know she is loved every single day of her life. And maybe after everything, that is the greatest revenge of all. Not destroying the people who hurt you, not proving them wrong with wealth or power or fame, just living, quietly, peacefully, happily, just being enough. If you are out there right now, in your own storm, in your own moment of despair, let me tell you what I wish someone had told me when I was lying in that snow, watching them take my daughter away. This is not your ending. This is not the final chapter of your story. It is just a dark passage, a tunnel you have to walk through to reach the light on the other side. Get up. Keep walking. The snow does not last forever. Spring always comes. And when you finally reach the other side, when you finally find your peace, you will look back at this moment and understand. Everything you went through, every tear you cried, every time you wanted to give up but did not, it was all leading you here, to the person you were meant to become. The Whitmores wanted me to be nothing. They wanted me to disappear. They wanted my story to end in the snow. Instead, I became someone, not someone famous, not someone powerful, just someone, a mother, a survivor, a woman who refused to stay down, and that is everything.